The bad man is gone. Arthur Smith has finally left, and Raheem Morris has returned to Atlanta, and he brings with him a shiny new prize from free agency in the form of Kirk Cousins. So will this get Atlanta back to the playoffs, a place they haven't been since 2017? Let's go ahead and discuss. What's crack-a-lackin'? It's your boy Broshmo, just in case you did not know. So welcome back to the Deep Dive series, where we take a look at each and every NFL team and we project how they will do in 2024. And today I got your Atlanta Falcons. Yes. We got the Atlanta Falcons. But before we look to the future, of course, we got to take a look at the past and why Arthur Smith got fired. Atlanta opened the season with promise, with victories over the Panthers and the Packers. But in week 3, Desmond Ridder looked horrible in a loss to the Lions. Fun fact, quarterback play would be a reoccurring problem all season for the Falcons. In week 4, the Falcons traveled to London to take on the Jags, where the best thing to come out of that loss was Toy Story's Sunday Fun Day. Things did get back on track with a solid win against the Texans, but the awful quarterback play reared its ugly head again versus the Commanders in a 24-6 loss. In week 6, Arthur Smith would piss off fantasy football fans everywhere by giving Bijan Robinson 1 carry. Apparently he was ill, but then why suit him up to begin with? Regardless, they won a close game where Ridder almost fumbled it away. Atlanta would go on a 3-game losing streak where Desmond Ridder was benched, Grady Jarrett tore his ACL, Arthur Smith refused to give Bijan the ball, Taylor Heineke got hurt, giving Ridder his job back. So the Falcons would go into their bye week 4-6, but they would come out with victories against the Saints and the Jets, where Bijan was getting the ball, Jesse Bates was intercepting passes, and things were great. Unfortunately, good things can't last forever, as they would lose to the Bucs, where Ridder looked bad and Bijan didn't get the ball, and then they would lose to the Panthers, where Ridder didn't look good and Bijan wouldn't get the ball. Desmond Ridder would get benched again, and Taylor Heineke would start versus the Colts, and this might have been the best offensive performance of the year. Arthur Smith leaned on not just Bijan Robinson, but all of his playmakers like Drake London and Kyle Pitts, and Jesse Bates even had another interception. After such a big win, Arthur Smith would do what he does best and piss fans off by having the worst blowouts back-to-back to end the season. The Falcons would finish 7-10, and Arthur Smith would be fired soon after that. In terms of efficiency, this offense was a total letdown, as their passing offense ranked 26th, the rushing offense was 22nd, and they were 26th in points scored. Defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen did his part defensively, but this team couldn't overcome how putrid the offense was. And mind you, the Falcons had drafted running back, tight end, and wide receiver in the top 10 of the first round the last 3 years. This was just bad, and to make things worse, they had the easiest schedule in the league. So firing Arthur Smith was kind of an easy call. Real quick, I gotta give a shout out to today's sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. I absolutely love Underdog Fantasy because I love football, and now that the football season is far and away, it doesn't mean my betting season has to be, because they do all kinds of sports, whether it's baseball, basketball, esports even. They got you covered, whether that's weekly best ball or my favorite, higher lower on player props. So if you sign up at Underdog Fantasy using promo code BROSHMO, then they will give you a first time deposit up to $250. That's right. So if you're gonna go and bet with Underdog Fantasy, use promo code BROSHMO, take advantage of this offer, but please bet responsibly and bet within your means. In terms of what they lost this offseason, it wasn't that much. Calais Campbell decided to leave for Miami, and then you have Cordero Patterson, special teams ace Cordero Patterson, decided to join Arthur Smith over in Pittsburgh. But aside from them, the guys that they did lose were kind of inconsequential, as it was like Jonnu Smith, Jeffrey Okudah. Oh, they also decided to trade Desmond Ridder to the Cardinals, so whoop-de-doo. But let's go ahead and talk about the additions this team made this offseason, because there was an expensive one. By far, the most expensive addition was Kirk Cousins. This team went out in free agency, and they knew what their biggest weakness was. It was quarterback. And Raheem Morris, the last time he had a head coaching job, things went down the drain because the quarterback play was not good. So he was like, best your sweet cheeks, that ain't gonna happen again. Now with the whole tampering thing, haven't looked too much into it recently. I don't know if they've decided on what the consequences are gonna be for that. Regardless, let's talk about the actual addition, because Kirk Cousins, I think, brings great stability to the Falcons offense. Like, he is by far a massive upgrade from Desmond Ridder and honestly anything that they had last year at quarterback. I mean, you look at Ridder, he had like a 72% adjusted completion percentage, which adjusted completion percentage just takes out like drops and spikes, throwaways and such. Compare that to Kirk Cousins, who was at 80%. On top of that, Kirk Cousins was kind of having a MVP caliber season until the injury. He was legit, opposed to like a Desmond Ridder, who his big time throws, 13 last year, were doubled by his turnover worthy plays. That was the thing, man. I get it. Essentially, it was his first year being a starter, but he was a third round pick. You didn't invest a lot in him. You didn't like what you saw last year. Yeah, go look for that upgrade. And they paid Kirk Cousins, and they paid him quite heftily, as the first 2 years of his contract are gonna be fully guaranteed. It is. I mean, they're gonna be paying him $100 million the first 2 years. So this is your starter for the next 2 seasons. Again, assume an injury doesn't occur or anything. So that is the plan. So I assumed, at least going into the draft, that they were going to then try to add parts to kind of, you now have this Super Bowl window, and you want to maybe add parts, some maybe immediate starters that could just help with that Super Bowl window. But that didn't seem to be the case. We'll talk about the draft in a moment, but I'm kind of on and not on board with what they did, which I'll discuss when we get there. But nonetheless, Kirk Cousins, I thought, was a really good addition and one that this team needed. And hopefully playmakers like Drake London and Kyle Pitts, maybe especially Kyle Pitts, maybe they can finally like break out into that, like, oh, these are like legit superstars, you know? So we'll see. And then, I mean, it does kind of help when you have Bijan Robinson and one of the best blocking units in the NFL. This offense should be pretty darn good, but wasn't the only addition that they made this offseason. They also went out and paid Darnell Mooney. Keep in mind, Darnell Mooney, man, used to be a pretty darn good receiver. And then injuries like in year 2 and 3, and then last year, just him and Justin Fields just didn't appear to have that chemistry, and he just wasn't targeted a lot. Like, Darnell Mooney's a hell of a good receiver, and he's gonna be given the opportunity to come in here and be a very good number 2 to Drake London. Technically, maybe even a number 3 with Kyle Pitts. And I'm hoping the offense, and I imagine it will get very creative with Kyle Pitts, because Moody's a guy that can work inside and out. Kyle Pitts is a guy that you could honestly line up in the slot or out wide. But they also traded for Rondale Moore, who is going to be a fun little weapon. And I think he's going to kind of function as Tutu Atwell did for the Rams last season, where it's like, yeah, you can use him as this gadget player, but he's also probably a solid enough slot wide receiver. So they're just given, hey, let's go out, let's get all these playmakers, let's get all this receiving help. So our offense could be this juggernaut that we were hoping it might be last season. So I like those additions there. Outside of that, they made like a few here and there, like Charlie Warner. They went out and grabbed him. He's really just a blocking tight end, which is fine. A-OK, he's probably one of the best out there when it comes to what he can do as a run blocker. So solid enough pickup. They also brought in, well, they re-signed, well, okay. They signed Ray McLeod. This is going to be your replacement for special teams ace Cordero Patterson. So Ray McLeod, I think he could do that well. But they also decided to bring back Street here to add to that rotation on the interior, because like low key, the pass rush of the Falcons last season was pretty solid. Like, they were 10th in the league in terms of getting pressure, and I don't think that necessarily the parts there I don't think the parts there, at least in my opinion, were good enough, especially with Grady Jarrett being lost during halfway through the season, warranted them to be that good. Like, people overlook how good Ryan Nielsen was as a defensive coordinator, and that was kind of a big loss. But luckily, you bring in a defensive-minded coach in Raheem Morris, and honestly, I'm kind of excited. I got some doubts. I got some hesitancy when it comes to this pass rush. But with how well that they performed last season, it might not even necessarily be that warranted. So I'll talk about the defense when we get to the defense. But I don't think they had any other big additions this offseason. So let's just go ahead. Let's talk about the draft. Let's talk about that first round pick. So with the 8th overall pick, the Atlanta Falcons went with Michael Penix Jr. This was a pick that I thought was either going to be an edge rusher, potentially like maybe a Roma Dunze if they want to just keep adding to the receiving room. Or honestly, I thought they could end up trading out, but they stay put and they take a quarterback. And a lot of people try to make this sound like this is like the strategy the Packers took. Except for the Packers took a 21-year-old quarterback opposed to a 24-year-old quarterback. So they were dealing with a little bit more youth. But to be fair, the quarterback position, typically you can play for a bit longer of a time. So benefit of the doubt, they're looking to secure the future with this pick. And while I still say, hey, you probably should have gone out and maybe got some pass rush. Honestly, you had your pick of the top defender there, and they decided not to go there. I'm like, hey, you have a Super Bowl window. Why not just try to stack the odds in your favor? Instead, they're looking to the future, and I don't mind it because you're going to have to pay guys like potentially Kyle Pitts, definitely Drake London. You got like AJ Terrell there and stuff. So you're going to eventually have to pay those guys, and which means you're probably going to have to get cheaper. And currently the fattest contract on the roster is Kirk Cousins. And I think in his third year, the guaranteed money will only be $10 million, and he would free up $32 million in cap. So I think it's very likely that with the Falcons, we're seeing Kirk Cousins probably, he's a starter for 2 years, and then after that, it's probably going to be Penix's team. At least that's my assumption. So it's not like the bad pick everyone made it out to be, I think. Is it the best pick? I don't think necessarily it was, but I could definitely understand it. I know also some people were talking about with the tampering, you don't know what picks are going to take from that. So, or if there's going to be a suspension dealt out. So you don't know if and with Kirk Cousins in place, you're never really going to be in place to take a quarterback in the next couple of years. And with the 2025 quarterback class, not exactly looking ideal. This was kind of your shot. You're picking in the top 10. It's a very good quarterback class. Take a shot. So I don't mind it. Like talking it through, it's like, okay, it's not nearly as bad as some people made it out to be. Doesn't make it any less funny though. It was still funny. Like at the time, shocking. And then in round 2, this one was a little bit surprised that they ended up trading up and taking Rook Arroyo. And I didn't think they had to do that, but to be fair, there ended up being like a little run on defensive interior players. Like soon after this, we saw Devondre Sweat and Johnny Newton come off the board. So maybe they felt like they had to go up and get their guy, and it ended up being Rook. Rook is someone who I don't think is going to see the field relatively early, and I think that's fine, but his like physical and athletic traits are pretty eye-popping. So someone that's going to be able to be part of your rotation, but you could also develop in the meantime. I think that's fine. Again, is it like a blow your pants off type of pick? No, but it's an all right pick. It's an okay pick. It's fine. I was a big fan of Rook. I think he was like edge 4 for me, or edge 4, interior 4 or something like that. And then the third round, They snagged Braylon Trice. This probably ended up being one of the best value picks that they made in the class. Braylon Trice had kind of a rocky offseason draft process, as a guy whose playing weight was like 270, 275 at Washington, goes to the combine, weighs in at 245, and then doesn't even run that fast. And you're like, okay, why'd you lose all that weight? How about we just put that back on? We know who you are. You're kind of this stupid strong, knock them back, knock them around, go and get that pressure type of guy. So I like that they did eventually address edge, because I feel like that's probably their biggest hole currently on the roster. And then in round 4, they decided to double dip on the interior, though, to be fair, Brandon Dorless is a bit of a tweener, as he's weighing in around that 270, 280 range. But you like the flexibility, the versatility he will give to this squad. He can kick inside on passing downs. He's probably going to function as like a 5 tech or inside 4 tech on this squad, where you're going to have him around the tackle, where he can hopefully wreak havoc. So that's fine. I liked Dorless. I had him around this area, late third, early fourth. So ended up being, I think, a solid pick. Round 5, they grabbed JD Bertrand, who is, in my opinion, basically Nate Landman, who I wasn't the biggest Nate Landman guy when he was coming out of Colorado. I was like, he could probably make the squad as a special teamer, but like limited in terms of athletic ability. I don't really see him being a game changer. And last year, he played really well, having to step up when Troy Anderson went down. But Bertrand kind of is cut from the same ilk, you know? Cut from the same cloth. Going to be a really good special teamer, but no real athletic traits that are going to make you think he could be like a high-end starter in the NFL. But again, I doubted Landman. Landman ends up stepping in and playing really well. This could maybe be a future Nate Landman. And then Jace McClellan, they go running back in the 6th round. And I'm like, hey, man, you got Tyler Algier, you got Bijan Robinson. You probably didn't have to go after running back, but hey, take your shot. I liked McClellan. Pretty solid back. Kind of is what it is. Their last couple of picks here in the 6th round were fine. Like Casey Washington, very good route runner, good possession receiver, doesn't really have high-end speed or quicks, struggles to get separation. Might make the squad because he's a little bit different than what they have, but yeah, I mean, he gives them a little bit of size, kind of is what it is. Zion Loke, I think that's how you say it, but this dude was just a rotation player at Georgia. Like, the gap discipline wasn't necessarily great, and I think that was kind of a reason he didn't see the field a ton. Like, there's some interesting, like, physical traits there, but, like, nothing special. I think he's probably going to end up on the practice squad. And it is what it is. But that was their draft class. All in all, I thought it was an all right draft class. Nothing special, but it has the chance to be, depending on Michael Penix and how he turned. Like, whenever you draft a quarterback in the 1st round, even if the rest of the class is kind of meh, it has a chance to be special just because of how valuable the quarterback position is. But I did like some of their picks after that as well. So, yeah, it was an all right class. Let's go ahead. Let's talk about the coaching staff, because there was some turnover there. Raheem Morris finally gets his 2nd shot at being a head coach. He hasn't been a head coach since 2011 with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and that whole Josh Freeman debacle. And it's wild to think that he hasn't been given that opportunity yet until now. It's just wild to think. Like, he bounced around the league as a defensive backs coach under guys like Jim Haslett with Washington, and you got Dan Quinn with Atlanta. Eventually, he ends up being the defensive coordinator there, and Dan Quinn, the head coach. And Raheem Morris has shown to be adaptable, to be able to tailor his defense to his roster. And I think he does a really good job at that. Like, a guy that I really liked that does that well was Phil Snow, who, hey, I'll tell you this, during his time in Carolina, the defense wasn't the problem. It wasn't. Some may say it was Matt Rule. But I really like Morris because of that. Because you saw once he arrived there with the Rams, he was doing one thing and it was like, okay, this is fine, but hey, we got a little bit of roster turnover here and there. Let's tweak some things and let's see how it goes. And man, he's been a really good DC. He really has. Darn good. And I'm so happy to see him get this second shot. But in terms of what he's going to bring defensively for the squad, because I think it's going to be his scheme, whether or not he's calling the plays, because you got Jimmy Lake here, and some people are kind of questioning what his role in this as DC is going to be. But I'm pretty sure him and Morris are going to be pretty like-minded in what the scheme is and what the play calling will be. But when it comes to Raheem Morris and what he likes to do, we're going to see that 3-4 defense. We're going to see some blitzing. This man was 11th last year in blitz rate with 26.8%. They will send some pressure, and you will not know where it's coming from. On top of that, it's going to be pretty zone heavy. I'm kind of curious maybe if he sticks with man coverage based on just how last year turned out. But I mean, there were some hiccups last year. Not like Ryan Nielsen. While he did a really good job with the defense, he's definitely a guy that likes to play a bit more press, a bit more man. And I think that was fine for like AJ Terrell, but you did see some other guys that didn't necessarily do that well. So I'm kind of curious, probably, especially with Clark Phillips, a little undersized. If he's going to be playing outside, that's more tailored fit to Raheem Morris's type of scheme. We've seen smaller corners succeed on the outside, like Darius Williams under Raheem Morris's scheme. So I think that kind of makes sense, that they're going to be a bit more zone heavy. We're going to see too high. I think that's all in the cards. And then in terms of Jimmy Lake, you're not dealing with someone who is new to the NFL. He's not. Like, I get it. He had that eight-year stint with the Washington Huskies where he was the DC, then the head coach. But he spent some time in the NFL prior to that. And I mean, he was the assistant head coach of the Rams last season. And I mean, prior to his stay at Washington, he was a defensive backs coach for the Lions and for the Buccaneers under Raheem Morris. So, hey, connection. And they both have a similar coaching tree, being under Monty Kiffin. So it's like they're going to be pretty like-minded in their approach here. But the fun thing about Raheem Morris, because it was like, okay, Falcons, you brought over a defensive-minded coach, but you know what he did? He brought over Zach Robinson to be the offensive coordinator. Very similar to what we saw with what DeMeco Ryans did with the Texans, bringing over Bobby Slowick from the Niners. I like this. I like DC's looking at the position coaching staff. That's a phrase. Look at his position coaches being like, hey, I think you could be a really good offensive coordinator. Will you come call my offense? I love that. There is a bit of a higher risk if those guys do exceptionally well that they get hired elsewhere. Or you could do what the Texans did and be like, hey, we're gonna lock you down, Bobby Slowick. We're gonna pay you a lot of money. But Zach Robinson is gonna be your OC. He was the former passing game coordinator and quarterbacks coach of the Los Angeles Rams. Prior to that, he did play 4 years in the league. For some weird reason in my head, I keep thinking Zach Robinson played for Miami, Ohio. It's Oklahoma State, by the way. And you know, this may piss people off because I know people don't like PFF, but used to be a data analyst over at PFF. So a lot of the stuff he's going to do is going to be analytical. What do you see going to bring to the table in terms of this offense? I think we're going to see more of the classic Sean McVay wide zone blocking scheme. I think that's a bit more tailored to what this offense wants to do, opposed to what we've seen last year with Sean McVay, where they leaned a lot more on like power concepts, inside zone, But I still think we're going to see motion. We're going to see passing we're going to see personnel and just properly layering your plays and giving the defense similar looks, but doing something different out of each of those looks. So you just keep the defense on their toes. And I mean, it's kind of wild, the evolution of the wide zone. So I don't know if we're ever going to get that point, but like you've seen like Kyle Shanahan start to turn more to power concepts over the last couple of years. You saw Sean McVay do it last year. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case this year with Zach Robinson, but it could be something they do somewhere down in the future after he's really just acclimated his scheme and what he wants to do. But I'm very excited to see this offense that's already got so many weapons. It's already has a very good offensive line. And shoot, I'm already starting to talk about the offense. But before I get into the offense, I got to talk about the rest of this coaching staff. As you got Marquise Williams, he's back as the special teams coordinator. He's been with the squad since 2001. He's done a pretty solid job at that. You got Jerry Gray as the assistant head coach and as a defensive assistant. You've seen more NFL teams and coaching staffs do this where they bring in very experienced coaches as senior defensive or offensive assistants. They just want to pull from those guys' wisdom. They want them in the room. So you got Jerry Gray here. We'll talk about the offensive half of that a little bit later. But Ike Hilliard, dude, he's a wide receivers coach. It's wild to think he's been a coaching for 10 years. It really is. I remember growing up watching him play for like the Giants and such. I just find it really cool when former players decide to become coaches, or when they do become coaches. It's just like, I feel like it ages me. And he's not the last player we're going to talk about when it comes to this coaching staff. Dave Huxtable, he's back as a senior defensive assistant, a guy that has a wealth of experience at the collegiate level. And he's been with the Falcons now going into his second year. We also have Jay Rogers. He's the defensive line coach. He was with the Chargers last season. And that defensive line, honestly, was pretty solid. At least that's when it comes to rushing the passer. So he's going to be here trying to help that pass rush. And then Barrett Rudd, dude. Oh my gosh. I remember when he was like a 90-something overall in Madden. Oh, back in the day. Back in my day. But he's the inside linebackers coach, and that's just so cool. You got a couple of other guys who've played in the league, like Lance Schulters. But, I mean, Rudd was like a legit pro baller. I think even John Timu was in the league as well. You have DJ Williams as the offensive assistant quarterbacks coach. You may have heard of his dad, Doug Williams. So, hey, NFL bloodline is alive and well on this coaching staff. As, hey, you got another ex-player here in T.Y. Yates. He was actually the wide receivers coach for the Falcons last year. Now he's going to be the quarterbacks coach, former quarterback himself. And then Ken Zampese, been a coach in the NFL since 1998. He's got a hell lot of experience. He's here as the senior offensive assistant. But now, finally, let's go ahead and talk about this offense. As per usual, you will see my grades for each position group over here. Let's go ahead, start with quarterback with Kirk Cousins. I kind of went over him a little bit when talking about their offseason moves and how he is just an immense upgrade. And admittedly, this is my first year giving out letter grades to each position group. And I will say my grades for like the quarterbacks and the running backs seem a bit harsh. Like, you got Kirk Cousins. He's like a top 12 quarterback in the league. B-. I'll admit my grades are a bit harsh, but to be fair, the worse you are, the worse the grade is. Like, if you're near the bottom of the league, I don't hold back. I throw out those D's and D minuses like they're candy. I think it is, if your position group is straight rubbish. I just do. So, hey, we'll rework the system next year, but Kirk Cousins, massive upgrade. Zach Robinson, he's been with Sean McVay. He's been with the Rams for a little bit. He's seen how to work with the quarterback that's not that mobile in Matthew Stafford, and they've done so and been very successful at that. I have no fears when it comes to that. Moving to a running back, I gave this group as a whole a B+, probably closer to that A range, because like Tyler Allgeier's also very good, ran for 1,000 yards his rookie year. Bijan Robinson, one of the best running back prospects we've seen since like Saquon Barkley. Though to be fair, like he didn't really get his chance to shine, though he was very successful last year, and we're hoping he can build on that. I would say, like I will say, like I have this running back position group, I think about 11th in the league. And to be fair, I also take into account the mobility of the quarterback, so it does bring the score down a little bit. But Bijan's great, man. He's phenomenal. Like he showed what he could do in the passing game last year. He ended up being a very good receiving target out of the backfield. He ended up having, where is it here? Almost 500 yards receiving, 4 tutties. Just very solid. What were the forced missed tackles? Didn't have 5 drops though. He had 17 forced missed tackles on 58 receptions. So really darn good. And then I mean, you got a guy like Tyler Allgeier who can come in and take some of that volume off, so you can keep Bijan fresh and healthy, but don't do it to the degree like Arthur Smith did last year. Man doesn't know how to use his weapons. But talk about the receiving core. Let's talk about it, man. Drake London, is he going to be in the midst of a breakout season? Is he going to break 1,000 yards? I think those things are very possible. Like we saw him dominate in some games last year. He was one of the better contested catch targets last season with a 51.5% contested catch rate. Pretty darn good. So be on the lookout for Drake London this year to have that breakout season. Darnell Mooney gets a fresh start, as I think him and Kirk Cousins are going to have a good rapport, man. I think Darnell Mooney is going to be able to remind the NFL, like, hey, no, I'm hella good. Things just didn't work out in the last third of my rookie contract with the Bears. And then Rondale Moore, I kind of talked about him being a kind of like a Tutu Atwell like weapon for this squad, that he's not just going to function as just your normal slot receiver, but I think they're going to get him, use him quite a bit as a gadget player as well. And then Kyle Pitts, man, will this be the year for Kyle Pitts? Will this be the year that Kyle Pitts puts everyone on notice again? Will he be that elite weapon everyone thought he could be when entering the league? I hope so. If there was a chance at it, this would be the year. This would be the year. Now he's going into year 4 here. So it's kind of a make or break year for Kyle Pitts, and I think it's going to go well. I really do think it's going to go well for him. On a side note, did set a career high in touchdowns last year, though you would have hardly noticed it, with 3. So let's see if we can get that number up. When it comes to the blocking, this is one of the best units in the league, as you could tell from my grades for the offensive line. A+ run blocking, A- pass blocking. This is a good core. Like Jake Matthews is still playing good football. Like he feels up there in years. Like where was he at? Is he like 31? I want to say he's like 31. Let's see. 32. Yeah, he's up there in dog years. He sure is. But still playing hella good, especially as a pass protector. Only allowed 27 pressures last season. So pretty darn solid from him. Next to him will be Matthew Bergeron. He was a tackle prospect for a lot of people coming out of Syracuse. Got some guard work at the Senior Bowl. You're like, oh no, man, this guy could be probably a hella good guard in the NFL. And honestly, was all right his rookie season. Was it anything special? No, but I think he might be due for a breakout season this year. At center, Drew Dolman, who, hey man, he's a really good run blocker, like a really good run blocker. If he could put it together as a pass protector, then yeah, this could be one of the better centers in the NFL. So be on the look for that, man. If he ends up just being better at protecting the passer. To be fair, Desmond Ridder didn't really help him a lot. Desmond Ridder didn't really help out this offensive line a lot when it came to just pocket presence and whatnot. And I think Kirk Cousins will definitely help out quite a bit. Chris Lindstrom, one of the best guard in the NFL. I had to stop myself. The dude is great. The dude is phenomenal. He is just dominant, whether it's as a run blocker or as a pass protector. Only allowed 15 pressures. It's a great player for a guy like Matthew Bergeron to learn from. Phenomenal. Caleb McGarry. He is, I think, one of the more underrated run blockers in the NFL. He was someone when his contract came due, I think it was last offseason that, or it may have been the year before, that I wanted the Dolphins to get. He ends up returning to the Falcons at a good price too. I think it was like 3 years, $30 million or something. Like, he is underrated. Don't sleep on Caleb McGarry. Just don't. Hella good. Like, it is hard to pinpoint a weak spot on the offensive line. Maybe you look at Drew Dolman when it comes to the pass. Maybe you look at Matthew Bergeron, who I think will take a step this season, who he was pretty darn solid. Like, I feel very good about what this offensive line is. However, you get to the depth of the offensive line, it's not nearly as good, unfortunately. As you look at, honestly, their best backup is probably Ryan Nuzil, who played about 200 snaps last year and did well enough. Did good enough for what you would expect a backup center to do. Might be their best backup there, like Storm Norton is here. And honestly, Storm Norton ain't half bad either. He's after rocky go at it in LA with the Chargers. I think he's settled down into being one of the better backup tackles in the NFL. But like, outside of that, like guys like Tyler Vrabel, I was never a big fan of Andrew Stuber. Like, I don't love their interior depth. I don't love their depth along the offensive line. So if injury does occur, I don't have a lot of confidence in the next guy up, so to speak. I just don't. When it comes to the other weapons in the passing game, Ray McCloud is probably going to function as the special teams ace, as Kadarius Hodge probably ends up being that wide receiver for another guy that could probably function in that Tutu Atwell type of role. So I think he's probably more in line for the role that Rondale Moore's going to be occupying. And then Casey Washington, again, he's just vastly different. Like, he's more akin to what Drake London brings to this receiving core in terms of size and just hands, possession type wide receiver. Some of the other guys back there, not really anyone of note. I didn't watch Isaiah Wooden during the draft process. Dylan Drummond, was he the Ole Miss? No, Eastern Michigan. See, I couldn't really tell you much about these other guys like Austin Mack. I can tell you a little bit actually, but he's more of a possession guy. But yeah, like, I feel like the top 6 wide receivers, fairly, like, it's a clear cut of who are the guys that can make this team. If they hold on to only 5 wide receivers, who will be on the outside looking in? I feel like probably Casey Washington would be that guy. Probably hits the practice squad. But they hold on to 6. You're pretty confident it's going to be Washington, Hodge, McLeod, Moore, Moody, and London. That tight end, Kyle Pitts, man, he has a chance to really revive the hype. He really does. He's a guy that can function not just in line, but in the slot and out wide. I hope they utilize him like that. There's buzz that's what's going to go down. So I'm excited about it. Charlie Warner, more of a blocking tight end. Fun fact, so is John Fitzpatrick. They do bring over Ross Dooley, who's kind of a good Swiss Army knife. So he could make the roster just because, again, kind of vastly different than guys like Fitzpatrick and Warner. If they were looking for someone who can function as a wide receiver, that's the guy. Another former San Francisco tight end. So that's kind of cool. Austin Stogner. Oh, he could be like an H-back type. Showed a little receiving upside. Had a little injury concern when he was at Oklahoma, and I think he went to SMU before returning to Oklahoma. I can't remember where was his pit stop specifically, but I think he could function as like an H-back. As that's kind of what Oklahoma utilized him as. The running backs, you got Avery Williams back there and Jason McClellan. Those are probably your other two that are going to be a part of the committee, but for all intents and purposes, this is Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier's show. This is their world. Guys like Williams and McClellan are just living in it. Couldn't tell you much about Carlos Rogers. Just, I guess, out of sight, out of mind. Probably on the outside looking in. Tyler Heineke will be that emergency quarterback or even vie for quarterback 2, depending on how they feel Michael Penix, how pro-ready is he. Penix, though, will be the quarterback of the future. No doubt in my mind. And I look forward to whenever that time comes, and hopefully it's 2 years down the line and not because of injury. John Paddock, did watch him during the offseason draft process. Ends up being a UDFA, probably coming from Illinois. Yeah. I don't even know if he makes a practice squad. Probably just ends up being a camp arm. Nothing more, nothing less. But I got a lot of hope for this offense. That's why they're ranked so high. If they can, especially if they can stay healthy. I have a lot of confidence in this offense. And let's go ahead. Let's talk defense. So when it comes to the defense, this is who I think are going to be your lead snap getters. These are the guys that I think are going to see the field the most. And I know that Falcon fans are looking at that pass rush grade and being like, why is this so low? D-, that's as low as it could get. And this is a Falcons team that was 11th last year in pressure rate. Well, they lost their top 2 pass rushers last season, or at least the guys that had the most pressures for the squad in Calais Campbell and Bud Dupree. Like, okay, sure, David Onyemata was up there and he did miss time because of an ankle injury, but outside of like Onyemata and Grady Jarrett, like, what is this team doing? Like, who's getting pressure? Like, yeah, like Caden Ellis, one of the best blitzing linebackers in the NFL last year, 26 pressures, 4 sacks. That's via PFF. That's all great. That's great, but who's getting pressure? Because you look at the edge position and you have like Arnold Ebiketie, someone who is yet to break out. Granted, was used only as a rotation player last year. For goodness sake, Bud Dupree doubled his snap total, which is stupid, which is ridiculous. But I'm ready to see, can this kid go? And I think we will this season. Lorenzo Carter, he's a very, at best, low-end edge 2. Probably should be just a rotation player. I mean, I that's why they go on day 2 and they get Braylon Trice to help this edge room. Because I don't see them getting pass rush from the edge position unless Ebiketie truly has that breakout. And I mean, we could talk about the depth. Let's go ahead and talk about the depth of this defensive line. As behind Ebiketie and Carter, you have Trice. It's probably the next guy up. James Smith-Williams at this point is depth, a guy that might make your final 53. You know, you got D'Angelo Malone, who's a DPR, a designated pass rush only, hasn't really produced yet in the NFL. Bradley Anae, who just hasn't worked out in the NFL. Like, where are you getting your pass rush when it comes to the edge position? You're not. I mean, right now it's filled with either rotation level players, replacement level players, or guys that we just haven't seen it from yet. Like Ebiketie, like 28 pressures, 7 sacks last year via PFF. Like, it's a good total given his snap count, but like, let's ramp up the snap count. Let's see what this kid can do. Again, relatively unproven. And then I do think like a lot of this pass rush is going to come from the interior, as long as like Gray Jarrett can stay healthy. Still, hell of a good interior player next to him, David Onyemata. People forget how good of a pass rusher he is. Like, very good run defender, but also a guy that can get a good amount of pressure. He had, 34 pressures, 5 sacks last season. Zach Harrison, who could be challenged by Brandon Dorlus. Zach Harrison kind of functioned in that 5 tech, 4 inside tech role last season, but someone who played predominantly edge rusher for Ohio State, and he was drafted by the old regime, but I don't think they're going to give up on him or anything. But you got Brandon Dorlus, who's a versatile player, someone who could play inside and out. That's going to be there to challenge him. So 2 relatively unproven players. You got Ruka Rohoro, who's going to be involved in the rotation, but they're going to be developing him. Unproven player. Taquan Graham, fine rotation player, but not much more than that. Like, I'm sorry if I'm a little skeptical at this team's ability to consistently get pressure, but I do think Raheem Morris is going to do a good job of scheming up that pressure. That I think he's going to make use of guys like Caden Ellis as an extra pass rusher, or maybe like a Mike Hughes, who's one of the better pass rushing slot corners in the NFL. I think he's going to make use of those guys. But looking at the interior depth outside of like your Graham and your Orohoro, you do got Street there, who's a good rotation player. LaCall London is kind of there for the ride. He had 200 snaps, but probably a guy you don't want to get a ton of snaps. Tommy Togiai is here from Cleveland. Hasn't really worked out in the NFL. Again, Zion Logue, I feel like is going to end up on the practice squad. Eddie Goldman's still around. That's kind of sick. But even then, Prince, was it Emile? Former Penn developmental prospect. A guy that had very interesting physical and athletic traits, that was very productive at Penn. Developmental guy. Developmental guy. He was from 3 drafts ago, whatnot. So it's like, I'm sorry. I think I'm allowed to be skeptical about the pass rush. But when it comes to the run defense, I'm very confident in it. Like, again, Onyemata, hella good when it comes to run defense. Ray Jarrett, hella good when it comes to run defense. Shoot, Lorenzo Carter is a pretty solid edge defender. He is. And then you jump to the linebacking core, and you got Caden Ellis there, who's exceptionally solid as a run defender. He's very good around the line of scrimmage, and you're kind of hoping that Troy Anderson kind of breaks out. He last year had the torn pec and missed most of the season. Kind of hoping that he kind of has this breakout year, but again, he was kind of an athletic freak that you're still waiting to see will pan out. But when it comes to the linebacker depth, they do have very good thumpers behind Ellis and Anderson. You got Nate Landman, who stepped in and was hella good. I was shocked. I kind of went into my little rift of hey man, I didn't think he had that in him, and he was probably one of the better run defending linebackers in the NFL. I think JD Berntrad is cut from the same cloth. Outside of that, I'm not really familiar with those other 2 guys, Moodin and was it Effler? Not familiar with them. Couldn't tell you much about them. But will Troy Anderson, will this be his breakout? Will it happen? We'll see. Again, he's going into year 3 now. Again, last year was a bit robbed from us when it came to seeing what he can do. We shall see. And the selling point with Anderson was just being an athletic freak and someone who has that coverage upside. So we'll see. We're going to wait and see. And hopefully the missed tackle rate will go down, because that was something with Anderson coming out that was okay, I mean, this guy flies around the field. He's always around the football, but tackling technique needs a little bit of work. We saw that his rookie year wasn't exactly that good. Hopefully that's something that has developed the last few years. When it comes to the secondary, another group that I'm a little hesitant on, but I do think the scheme change to more zone heavy will pay dividends, especially for a guy like Clark Phillips, who's going to be manning the other outside corner spot outside of AJ Terrell, who is one of the best corners in the league. I would say. I think he's a top 10 corner in the NFL, maybe top 15. There's a lot of good corners in the NFL, but Clark Phillips, coming out of Utah, undersized, thought he might end up getting pigeonholed to slot only, and he ends up playing most of his snaps last season on the outside, and this is in a man-heavy defense, and this was someone I was worried about. Like, I don't know if he could exactly follow guys across the field. I don't think that's his cup of tea, but in a zone-heavy scheme like this, off coverage, like, yo, watch out, because he has that playmaking potential. He has that game-breaking potential where he could turn a turnover into a pick six. So I'm very excited. And I mean, out of all people, Raheem Morris is the guy to develop these smaller corners. Like we've seen it with the Rams with guys like Darius Williams. I think Troy Hill was around during that time as well. So be on the lookout for that. I did mention Mike Hughes as like their best pass rushing slot, but I think that's the only time he's really going to see the field, when they want him around the line of scrimmage and want him to go in and bring pressure on the quarterback. Outside of that, I think D Ford has kind of established himself as the starting slot corner on this squad. I think he's a bit better in coverage. And I think while the splash plays haven't been really there for him, I think he's done a very solid job at warding off targets. I think last season his completion rate allowed was around 51%. Let me just go look that up real quick for D Ford. It was oh no, it was about 70%. I think I was thinking of I was thinking of Clark Phillips. He had a 51.7%. So okay, so D Ford, again, 70% isn't like terribly high for a slot corner, because there's gonna be a lot of easy receptions had in the slot. But like, I like D Ford, man. He was someone I think I gave a shout out to last year when I did my deep dive. Someone who could step up. When it comes to the secondary, Jesse Bates, probably the best safety in football. There, I said it. I mean, the dude's fantastic. It was one of the best sign-ins last offseason. He ended up having 6 interceptions. Dude was just good. He was a game changer. Had a pick 6 last season as well. I had 2. I know he had 1. Then I think the other starting safety spots up for grabs, because you have the incumbent Richie Grant, who just hasn't really worked out well, but he was 4th on the team in snaps. Not to say he was terribly productive, though. And we did see DeMarco Hellams start to cut into that volume. Ended up having 370 snaps last season. And I thought Hellams was probably going to be more of a special teamer. He's more of a box guy, someone that's really good coming downhill. And I think there's a good shot, man. They might be like, okay, well, Richie Grant, he's in his contract year. Let's give Hellams a shot, see how he does. So I think that's probably how it's going to happen. But it is going to be a battle, I think, not just through camp, but also through the season. When it comes to the depth on this squad, I don't love it. Antonio Hamilton, Sr., as a depth player at corner, someone with a lot of starting experience over the last few seasons. I love him as a depth player. If injury happens, he could step in and do a fine enough job. I really like that. But after him, you could tell that this team does not got a lot in terms of depth. Like Mike Hughes, probably a better man corner than zone corner, but at least someone that has inside and outside flexibility. Kevin Keen's back in the league. Is that a good thing? I don't know. We'll find out, I guess. We'll find out, or hopefully we don't have to. But they have nothing in terms of depth or like things to feel good about when it comes to the squad. I'm unfamiliar with the 2 UDFAs they have there at corner. Like I could, outside of like Harrison Hand, who this structure was really just a special teamer. Couldn't tell you much about the other 2 guys. Anthony Johnson, There's a lot of Anthony Johnsons in the NFL, by the way. This isn't the one for Green Bay. Okay, I remember him out of Virginia. He was mad slow. I actually liked him, but he was mad slow. He was there with Ventress Cypress, who's now at Florida State. But Anthony Johnson, honestly, the scheme change. Sleeper to make the squad? I don't know, man. I don't know. We'll see during training camp. So that's going to be something I'm going to be on the lookout for. When it comes to safety depth, there's nothing there. I mean, you got Dane Cruikshank, who's a good special teamer. Couldn't tell you much about Micah Abernathy. Literally first time hearing this name. So I guess those two will challenge for that last safety spot on the roster. It's not saying much, so it kind of is what it is, but it's fine. Like, if Richie Grant or Helms ends up being one of your backup safeties, you're probably feeling all right. You're probably feeling okay, but I think it's fair to be skeptical about the depth, and with the scheme change. I mean, I feel like it's gonna be really good for Clark, but like D Ford, how's that gonna happen? How's that gonna go? Like Mike Hughes, again, more of a man coverage guy. Is that gonna be okay? Is that gonna be fine? So I think it's fair. So I think it's fair to say that this defense will probably be middle of the pack. I think that was about where they were last year because the passing defense was kind of like fine. Because because the defensive points allowed was about middle of the league. Like this defense, outside of their run defense, was pretty middle of pack, which is fine. If your offense can get it done, then you don't need to be completely lights out on defense. So I'm going to be very fascinated with the scheme change and how that all works out. Pass rush is probably going to be the theme, though I'm looking out most for this squad, but it's going to be mainly from that edge position. Will Ebiketie kind of like step up and break out? Will Braylon Trice end up being a more vital piece in that rotation, maybe usurp Lorenzo Carter at some point? So that's going to be probably the thing for me that I'm like going to be really looking out for this year. But let's go ahead. Let's project how this team's going to do in 2024. When it comes to this team's strength of schedule, once again, I have them with the easiest strength of schedule in the NFL. Man, luck, is that luck of the draw or just the luck of playing in the NFC South? I think both can be true at the same time, but let's go through the game by game. You got the Arthur Smith revenge game. I don't think that's happening. I think Falcons get a win there. Having to travel to Philly, that's going to be a bit tough. Taking Kansas City, that's going to be a bit tough. So I think, can they get a win either here or there? I think, wildly enough, I think maybe this Eagles game is a bit more plausible than the Chiefs, but maybe I'm just kind of overrating the Chiefs. But let's say they get a win. They get a win here. Let's say they beat the Eagles. The Eagles were pretty squishy last season. I think that they could probably split with the Saints. They'll probably split with the Bucks. I think the Bucks are going to be very competitive. Let's say they take both games from the Panthers. The Seahawks game is going to be, I mean, it's at home. Seahawks team, I think another team that's in transition. Oh, they had a full overhaul of the coaching staff. Cowboys, can they drop a game here? This could be an offensive shootout, though. That could be hella fun. But I think my biggest question is, well, it's not at prime time, so Kirk Cousins, it's possible. I think for now, let's just hold. Yeah, you know what? I'll give them that Dallas game. Coming out of your bye, you get the Chargers, you got the Vikings. This Raiders team probably is beatable as well. Oh wow, man. Golly, look at that. What an easy schedule down the stretch. You get your away games, like your toughest game is this game against the Raiders down the stretch in Vegas. But outside of that, you get maybe the JJ McCarthy led Vikings in Minnesota. You get the Chargers at home, you get the Giants at home, you get a Commanders team which hey, don't sleep on the Commanders, man. Maybe they're grinding by the end of the season. I mean, this could be cool. Also seeing Dan Quinn and Reem Morris now both head coaches at the same time in the NFL. That's gonna be fun. That's gonna be a fun game for both those guys. But seeing this team 14 wins, kind of ludicrous and probably out of the realm of possibility. But we're gonna set it there. We're gonna set the ceiling at 14. Everything goes right. This defense clicks. This team being 11th in pressure rate last year wasn't a fluke. The edge talent actually steps up. But I think more realistically, I think my projection is going to be 10-7, fighting for that divisional crown with teams like the Saints and the Bucks. I think early on, this team might have a few gaffes here and there against just really good opponents. So taking that Eagles win away, this Cowboys win. But like down the stretch, you gotta imagine this team may goof somewhere, right? Like I could see with this Washington game, this Raiders game, especially with them not being at home for the Falcons, end up going the other way. So I think it's in the realm of possibility. I mean, this team has hovered around 500 for, well, I was going to say for the last few years, but that's not necessarily true. This team has been competitive for the NFC South crown, but it hasn't really meant that they've been good. So I think they're going to be competitive for the NFC South crown. I think there's going to be maybe some growing pains here and there, maybe more particularly on the defense. I think the Falcons are going to be exceptionally good at beating sub 500 teams, losing teams, and where their struggles are going to occur are against those better teams. I know it's a crazy theory, right? Oh, they beat bad teams but lose to good teams. Oh, wild. But hey, as a Dolphins fan, kind of just reality, right? But yeah, that's how I think the Falcons will fare next season. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I'm really excited to see this offense and see Bijan get a real workload and this team really just take advantage of a running back they spent a top 10 pick on, mind you. But hey, if you want to check out some of your division rivals, I've already done videos for both the Panthers and the Saints. You can check them out down here, or you can check out some of my summer deep dive videos. Hey, do you want another quarterback, Falcons? Check out my quarterback deep dive right here. But as always, until next time, you be easy, my friends. Later.